The pale sunlight of the autumn afternoon filtered through the fiery red maple leaves, illuminating the Miller family's brand-new white-painted two-story wooden house. Sarah took a deep breath, her lungs filling with the fresh air and the characteristic crisp chill of a New England October. Beside her, Mark held her close, his radiant smile unable to conceal his joy and excitement at starting a new chapter in their lives. After years of living in a cramped city apartment, they finally had their own home, a place to build memories and nurture family happiness. Their 10-year-old daughter Lily was happily skipping around the spacious backyard, her clear laughter echoing through the quiet space. "Shall we take a commemorative photo in the living room?" Sarah suggested, taking out her phone. Mark nodded in agreement, put his arm around his wife, and together they stepped inside. The living room was flooded with natural light from large windows. The freshly painted light cream walls, the glossy oak floors, and the light gray sofa created a cozy and modern space. Sarah chose a spot with an antique stone fireplace as the backdrop, where she had just hung a large mirror with an intricately carved wooden frame. "Lily, come take a picture with Mom and Dad," Mark called out to the garden. Lily quickly ran in, her blonde hair shimmering in the afternoon sun. The whole family stood close together, smiling broadly as Sarah pressed the shutter button. After reviewing the photo on her phone, the smile on Sarah's face suddenly faded. A cold, indescribable feeling of unease spread through her body. "Mark, look at this," she said softly, her finger trembling as she pointed to the screen. Mark tilted his head to look. The photo showed their happy family moment. But behind them, reflected in the large mirror, was a strange figure. It was the image of a child, about 5 or 6 years old, standing silently in the corner of the room. The child's face was slightly tilted, its dark eyes staring directly at the camera, showing no hint of joy or mischief. "What is this?" Mark frowned, his expression puzzled. "We don't have any other children in the house." Sarah shivered. That's right, apart from Lily, they had no young children, and certainly no strange child had appeared in the living room at that moment. "It must be a reflection," Mark tried to reassure her, but his voice lacked conviction. "Let me take another one." They stood in their previous positions and Sarah took another photo. This time they tried to pay closer attention to everything around them. When they reviewed the new photo, both Sarah and Mark couldn't help but feel horrified. The child was still there in the mirror, but this time it was no longer standing silently. It was smiling. A strange smile, unlike the innocent smile of a child, but a mysterious smile, even somewhat cunning. Its dark eyes seemed to pierce through their very souls. Lily, who had initially been curious, now also began to feel scared. "Mommy, Daddy, I don't like that friend," she said timidly, snuggling close to her mother. Curiosity and unease compelled Sarah and Mark to investigate the history of the house. They contacted elderly neighbors, searched for information online, and even went to the town's land registry office. What they discovered left them in shock. The house had been built in the 1950s. Many years ago, a family had lived here, and they had a son named Timothy, who was only 5 years old. Timothy had mysteriously disappeared one cold winter evening, and despite the police's efforts to search for him for years, the boy was never found. The case had become a sad scar in the town's history. That night, as the family was trying to fall asleep in their new home, Sarah suddenly woke up to a strange sound. It was a giggle, soft but incredibly clear, echoing from somewhere in the living room. She gently shook Mark awake. He had heard the laughter too. The couple quietly got out of bed, their hearts pounding in their chests. Pale moonlight streamed through the window, dimly illuminating the living room. The large mirror still hung on the wall, reflecting the silent space. But the giggling continued as if a child was playing in the darkness. Sarah trembled as she picked up her phone and opened the photo library. The family photo taken that afternoon was still there, but a terrifying change had occurred. The child was no longer standing in the mirror. It had stepped out of the reflected world, and now it was standing right between Sarah and Mark in the photo. Its face was still turned towards the camera, but this time, its smile was wider, more sinister. Its dark eyes seemed to stare directly into their souls, carrying a bone-chilling coldness and a promise of terrible things to come. Lily screamed from the bedroom. Sarah and Mark held each other tightly, feeling an overwhelming fear, a paralyzing helplessness engulfed them. They had brought home not just a new house, but also a lost soul, a child trapped between two worlds, and now it had emerged to demand their attention. The cycle of time and possession had begun, and they didn't know how to escape this nightmare. The giggling continued to echo in the still night, like a cold taunt from a long-lost child. The sudden ring of the phone sliced through the quiet afternoon, making Amelia jump. She was nestled in the plush armchair by the window of her Paris attic apartment, sipping Earl Grey tea and engrossed in a detective novel. The phone screen displayed a string of unfamiliar numbers, no sender name attached. Curious, Amelia swiped to unlock. An image message popped up. It was a photograph of her, sitting right there in the armchair, her gaze slightly pensive as she looked out the window. Amelia frowned. She was certain she hadn't taken this picture, and there was certainly no reason for a strange number to have it. Initially, she thought perhaps a friend was playing a prank, but none of her friends had this kind of odd sense of humor. She deleted the message and continued reading, trying to shake off the initial unease. But just a few minutes later, her phone vibrated again. Another message, still from the same unknown number. This time, the picture showed her standing in the kitchen, pouring water into a kettle. Amelia remembered that moment clearly. She had been completely alone in the apartment. The annoyance gradually morphed into a vague sense of disquiet. Was someone watching her? How could they have taken these photos without her knowing? She began to feel an invisible gaze following her every move. The following days became a sequence of bizarre picture messages. Amelia's phone would buzz at any time of day, sending her photos taken in completely random moments. When she was dozing off on the sofa, when she was working on her computer, when she was walking down the street to buy bread. Each photo was taken from a different angle, showing that the photographer had been very close to her. But the most terrifying thing, the thing that made Amelia's blood run cold every time she looked at those pictures, was the appearance of a strange woman. In every single photo, no matter where or when it was taken, the woman was always standing right behind Amelia. She had long, dark hair that fell down, almost completely obscuring her face, but Amelia could still clearly see her eyes. Empty, black, expressionless eyes, like two endless pits drawing in darkness. Amelia tried to find out who was sending these messages. She called the number back, but only received endless, hopeless ringing. She asked her friends and colleagues, but no one knew the strange phone number. The fear in Amelia's heart grew steadily, turning into a constant obsession. She began to feel like a phantom was trailing her, a cold presence always right behind her. Unable to bear it any longer, Amelia decided to look into the history of the apartment she was living in. She had been renting it for almost a year and had never been curious about the previous occupants. She contacted the landlord, an elderly man who lived in the city suburbs. After a few phone calls, he reluctantly told Amelia about the previous tenant of the apartment. It was a middle-aged woman named Giselle Dubois. She had lived alone and had passed away suddenly in the apartment not long ago. The landlord didn't know much about Giselle, only remembering that she was a reclusive person who seemed very lonely. Amelia asked about the date of Giselle's death. The landlord hesitated for a moment before answering. The day she passed away was the very day Amelia received the first photo from the strange phone number. A cold shiver ran down Amelia's spine. This terrifying coincidence made her shudder. So, the woman with the empty eyes in the photos? Could it be the ghost of Giselle Dubois? Why was she haunting her? And why did her death coincide with the day she started receiving the strange messages? That night, Amelia barely slept. She lay tossing and turning in bed, listening to every tiny sound in the apartment. The darkness seemed thicker than usual, and she had the feeling that someone was standing just outside her bedroom door, watching her with soulless eyes. Amelia's phone, placed on the bedside table, suddenly lit up. A new message from the strange phone number. This time, the photo showed her lying in bed, her eyes tightly closed. And right behind her, in the dim light, was the face of Giselle Dubois. Her face was pale, her empty eyes stared directly at the camera, and on her lips was a faint, icy smile. Amelia screamed in terror, quickly turning on the light. The room was brightly lit, but the horrifying image on her phone still haunted her mind. She knew she couldn't escape anymore. Giselle Dubois was here in this apartment and she wanted something from her. The initial fear gradually gave way to a strange curiosity and an urge to find out the truth. Why had Giselle chosen her to haunt? Were there any secrets hidden behind her death? And why did her death coincide with the day she moved into this apartment? Amelia decided to start investigating Giselle Dubois's life. She searched for information online, asked her former neighbors, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that had ended mysteriously. She discovered that Giselle was a solitary woman with no family or close friends. She had lived quietly in this apartment for many years, and almost no one knew anything about her past. But then Amelia found a crucial detail. On an online forum for vintage photography enthusiasts, there was a post from many years ago by someone with the nickname Giselle D. This person had posted several old black and white photos of a young woman who looked strikingly similar to Amelia. Amelia was stunned. Why would Giselle have photos of her, taken long before she moved into this apartment? Was there a connection between her and Giselle? That night, as Amelia was reviewing the photos on the forum, her phone vibrated again. A new message from the strange phone number. This time, the photo was different from all the previous ones. It didn't show Amelia anymore, but an old black and white photo, the very same one she had seen on the forum. And behind the girl in the photo stood a woman with long dark hair and the familiar empty eyes, Giselle Dubois. But this time she wasn't standing still. She was pointing towards a spot just outside the frame. A strong intuition told Amelia that Giselle was trying to tell her something, trying to lead her to a forgotten truth. The place Giselle was pointing to in the photo, Amelia realized it was a small corner in her own apartment, where she had recently placed an old bookcase. With her heart pounding, Amelia approached the bookcase and began to rummage through it. Behind a stack of old books, she found a small wooden box covered in dust. Inside the box, she found a yellowed letter and a small key. The letter was written in an old style of French, the handwriting shaky. Amelia asked a friend to translate it for her. The letter told a story of a forbidden love, a painful secret, and a vow of revenge. Giselle had loved a man, but he had betrayed her and abandoned her. In despair, Giselle had taken her own life in this very apartment, and she had sworn that her spirit would forever haunt this place, waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. And the small key, it opened a secret compartment hidden behind a wall in Amelia's bedroom. Inside the secret compartment, Amelia found an old, worn diary belonging to Giselle. The diary pages chronicled her last days filled with pain and despair, along with scribbled lines about the vengeful curse she had sworn before her death. Amelia understood. Giselle had chosen her to carry out her curse. Perhaps because she looked like the woman who had stolen Giselle's love all those years ago. The self-taken photos were a way for Giselle to get closer to her, to gradually invade her life. But Amelia didn't want to become a victim of a curse from the past. She decided to confront Giselle's spirit, trying to understand her pain and find a way to set them both free. That night, Amelia sat alone in the apartment, holding Giselle's diary in her hands. She reread the tear-stained words, trying to feel the pain and resentment of the departed woman. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, causing the diary pages to flutter slightly. The darkness seemed to thicken, and Amelia felt a cold presence very close by. The strange phone number sent another message. This time, the photo showed Amelia sitting on the floor, clutching the diary tightly to her chest. And right behind her, Giselle Dubois appeared more clearly than ever before. Her face no longer held that empty look, but shone with a deep sadness and a plea. Amelia looked directly at the photo into Giselle's eyes. She no longer felt fear, but instead a profound sense of empathy. "I understand, Giselle," Amelia whispered. "I understand your pain. I will help you find peace." And at that moment, Amelia's phone vibrated one last time. A new message from the strange phone number. This time, the photo was completely black. The strange messages never returned. Amelia continued to live in the apartment, but she no longer felt Giselle's cold presence. She believed that Giselle's spirit had been released, had found peace after so many years of being trapped by resentment. But Amelia never forgot the story of Giselle Dubois and the strange phone. It reminded her that sometimes the past is always watching us, and forgotten secrets can resurface at any time, haunting the lives of innocent people. London, a bleak autumn afternoon. A fine drizzle fell like cold fingers stroking my hair as I stepped into the antique shop, Dust and Time, in Notting Hill. The small shop was crammed with old objects, each seemingly holding a silent story within. The yellowish light from a vintage chandelier cast down, creating a space that was both nostalgic and slightly gloomy. The smell of dust mingled with the scent of old paper and a hint of mildew, hitting my nose and evoking a sense of. I've always been a photography enthusiast, particularly drawn to vintage cameras. Today, my gaze fell upon an old Kodak box camera, resting quietly on a glass shelf. The dark brown leather exterior was worn, and the once shiny metal trim was now covered with a dull patina. Picking up the camera, I felt its strange weight and coldness in my palm. There seemed to be a hidden energy within it, both alluring and making me slightly uneasy. The shop owner, an old man with wispy white hair and deep-set eyes, smiled mysteriously when I asked about it. He said the camera had been there for a very long time, unnoticed by anyone. For a bargain price, I took it back to my small flat in East London. For the first few days, everything was normal. I eagerly loaded a new roll of film and began capturing everyday moments. The bustling street with its passers-by, the vibrant yellow leaves of the trees in the park, and even my lazy black cat curled up on the sofa. When the roll was finished, I took it to a small lab near my home to be developed. A few days later, when I held the photos in my hands, I couldn't help but be stunned. In every single picture, whether it was a scene I had photographed in the park, on the street, or even inside my own flat, a shadowy figure of a man appeared. He stood in the distance, blurred like a phantom, but still clear enough for me to make out his gaunt frame and thinning hair. The strange thing was, when I took those photos, I was absolutely certain that no one was standing in those positions. A chilling sensation ran down my spine. Initially, I thought I was mistaken, or perhaps it was just a coincidence. But upon closer inspection of each photograph, the appearance of the mysterious man became too clear and too frightening. Curiosity and unease drove me to research this old camera. I began scouring websites and forums dedicated to vintage photography. After days of searching, I finally found a significant piece of information. My Kodak camera had belonged to a photographer named Elias Thorne, a fairly well-known figure in the 1970s. But what sent a shiver down my spine was the information about his mysterious disappearance 40 years ago. No one knew what had happened to Elias Thorne. He vanished without a trace, leaving behind a career at its peak. Since learning that information, strange things began to happen in my flat. Occasionally, I would find old black and white photographs mysteriously appearing on my desk, on the floor, even clipped between the pages of my books. These photos had all been taken with my camera, and the main subject in them was none other than Elias Thorne. In these pictures, he was often standing alone in gloomy, deserted spaces, with a sad and haunted look in his eyes. One night, as I was trying to drift off to sleep, a sudden gust of icy air swept through the room, making the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. In the still darkness, I heard a faint whisper beside my ear, a sound both distant and as if echoing from within my own mind. The voice was hoarse, carrying a deep sadness and utter despair, whispering, "Keep taking pictures. I need one last photo." My heart skipped a beat. I sat bolt upright, drenched in cold sweat, trying to process what I had just heard. The room remained pitch black, with only the pale moonlight filtering through the window, painting eerie shapes on the walls. That whisper, though fleeting, had planted a seed of utter terror in my heart, a feeling that an invisible presence was very close, watching my every move. The following days became a string of sleepless nights and moments of extreme tension. I constantly felt like someone was observing me, a cold and haunting gaze. The old photos of Elias Thorne continued to appear more and more frequently and with increasing clarity. In one photo, I saw him standing in front of a mirror, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror, as if seeing something horrifying. In another, he was holding my camera, pointing the lens directly at the photographer, at me. I knew I was being drawn into a horror story that I couldn't control. This old camera was not just an inanimate object. It seemed to be a gateway connecting the world of the living and the world of restless spirits. Elias Thorne's curse, forgotten memories, and hidden truths were slowly being revealed, and I, the unwitting owner of this camera, had become a part of that terrifying story. What should I do? Can I escape this ghostly vortex? Or will I become the last photo that Elias Thorne's spirit is seeking? Darkness enveloped me, and the cold whisper still lingered somewhere, reminding me of an unresolved curse and a horrific truth waiting to be exposed. Fear, like an invisible rope, tightened around my heart, making me suffocate in my own small flat, in the heart of glamorous but darkly mysterious London. Last summer, I and my three best friends, Liam, Chloe, and Maya, decided to take a trip to the English countryside. We all shared a fascination for exploring abandoned places, those with a haunting beauty and eerie stories. Our chosen destination was Oakhaven Manor, an old estate that had been abandoned for over half a century. Rumor had it that the place was haunted, and the tales of lingering spirits only fueled our curiosity. As Liam's old car pulled up to the manor gates, a sudden chill descended upon us. The rusted wrought iron gates were crumbling, and the stone walls covered in green moss and tangled vines looked truly ominous. The empty window sockets resembled dark, hollow eyes staring into our souls. I clearly felt a still and gloomy atmosphere enveloping the place, even though the sun was still shining. The scent of dampness, earth, and an indescribable fishy odor wafted in the air, making me shiver. We carefully squeezed through the gate, stepping into the overgrown garden. Ancient stone statues stood silently amidst the wild bushes, looking like ghosts hiding in the shadows. The main house loomed before us, with its broken roof tiles and peeling patches of wall. An indescribable unease crept into my mind, but the eagerness to explore won out. Liam, with his DSLR camera in hand, led the way, constantly snapping photos of the manor's dilapidated and gloomy state. Chloe and Maya stayed close beside me, occasionally startled by small noises. I walked last, feeling as if someone was watching us from behind. We wandered through the empty rooms, where the wallpaper had rotted and peeled away, revealing damp walls. Weak light filtered through the broken window panes, creating eerie streaks of light that cast long, distorted shadows on the decaying wooden floors. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the silent space, creating a chilling sound. Liam took many pictures, trying to capture the haunting beauty and the ravages of time. As dusk began to fall, we decided to leave the manor. As soon as we reached the car, Liam eagerly opened his camera to review the photos he had just taken. We all huddled together, looking at the screen. The initial photos were quite impressive, capturing the desolate and ancient feel of the house. But then one photo made us all fall silent. It was a picture of a dark hallway on the second floor. In the distance, in the dim shadows, a face appeared. A pale, lifeless face with deep black eyes and a thin smile that stretched from ear to ear. What is that?" Maya stammered, her voice trembling. "No way, there was clearly no one there at the time," Noah said, his face pale. Liam insisted that he had checked very carefully before taking the picture. There was absolutely no one in the hallway. I felt an icy shiver run down my spine. The smile in the photo was too grotesque, too terrifying. It seemed to freeze every emotion within me. In a panic, Chloe snatched the camera from Liam's hand and quickly deleted the terrifying photo. We quickly got into the car and left Oakhaven Manor, trying to forget the image of that haunting smile. But deep down, I knew we had taken something terrible with us. That night, as the four of us were trying to sleep in the small rented house in a nearby town, I suddenly woke up to a faint sound. A laugh. A small, high-pitched laugh, as if echoing from a very far place, yet chillingly clear. It repeated, sometimes near, sometimes far, seeping through the cracks in the doors and the thin walls, sowing terror in my mind. I tried to cover my ears, closing my eyes tightly, but that eerie laughter still echoed as if mocking my fear. I stayed awake all night, clutching the thin blanket, feeling as if someone was standing right outside the bedroom door, staring at me. The next morning, as the weak dawn light appeared, we realized that Noah was gone. Panic engulfed the three of us. We called Noah repeatedly, but no one answered. We searched everywhere inside and outside the house, but there was no trace of him. Finally, Liam remembered that Noah always had a habit of leaving his phone on his bedside table. We rushed back to Noah's room and found his phone still lying on the table next to the bed. With my heart pounding in my chest, Liam picked up the phone. The lock screen displayed the current time, but there was something unusual. In the photo library, there was a new photo that had just been taken at midnight. Trembling, Liam opened the photo. The scene that appeared made me freeze in horror. Noah was standing in the corner of the room where he had slept the night before. His face was pale, his eyes wide and lifeless, and on his lips was a thin smile that stretched from ear to ear, exactly the same smile we had seen in the photo at Oakhaven Manor. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My whole body trembled. I couldn't believe my eyes. That Noah had become a part of that terrifying thing. And in the darkness behind Noah, a figure was standing, blurred but becoming clearer. I couldn't clearly see the face, but I felt the presence of a sinister smile lurking in that darkness. A mocking smile, a satisfied smile, the smile of a predator who had found its next prey. The faint laughter started again, this time clearer, closer, as if echoing right behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but only saw the empty room. Chloe and Maya also looked at each other with horrified eyes. We knew we were cursed. The smile behind us was not just an image in a photo. It was a malevolent entity watching us, step by step, dragging us into eternal darkness. I felt an overwhelming fear, a sense of helplessness and despair. I didn't know if we could escape this, or if I would be the next one to appear in a photo with that terrifying smile behind me. Horror surrounded me, and that eerie laughter still echoed somewhere, reminding me of an inescapable curse.